Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 14 of the Survival Project. Today's episode is a really, really important one, especially if you ever struggle with gut symptoms, things like food anxiety, IBS, IBD, or you've just felt frustrated trying to understand what your body is doing and why. I'm joined by Lorraine Cooney. She's a specialist dietitian, author, and a gut health expert. She spent nearly 2 decades working with people living with complex digestive issues. Lorraine combines her deep clinical knowledge with her own lived experience. I just want to say a sincere thank you to Salt's Healthcare for supporting today's episode. It's their continued support that allows this podcast to grow, reach more people, and create a space for honest, practical discussions around living with chronic conditions. So let's get into it. Lorraine, thank you so much for joining me. Could you kind of just delve into how you got into gut health and how it became your speciality?
Well, thanks for inviting me onto your podcast. I'm delighted to be here. When I look back nearly 20 years ago, when my first patients as a student dietitian in an outpatient setting had IBS, I wasn't very familiar with what that was back then. But my superior or supervising dietitian said to put them on this diet and give me a booklet. It was an elimination diet. And then about 4 weeks later, she came back and her symptoms had completely resolved. And that was it. I think that was the hook. I was mesmerized. I'm like, that is what I want to do in dietetics. And back then, nearly 20 years ago, like FODMAPs didn't even exist. We might talk about that in the future, but it's a diet that we use, a restrictive diet that people use to help manage gut symptoms. So following that, I went on and did all my clinical experience, hospital, community research, because I think that's needed as a foundation to be able to manage complex gut cases. Then FODMAPs did emerge about 15 years ago. And it changed everything in terms of IBS management. I signed up to train immediately. I saw incredible results with my patients, and that was the start of my career, focusing on IBS and digestive disorders. I also have had my own gut challenges, and I know what it's like to be doing everything right and still not feel okay and kind of feel dismissed or brushed off. And that pushed me to dig deeper into why something like that would be happening to me as a dietitian, because I knew it wasn't diet related. So I became fascinated, like so many other people are, by this term, the gut-brain axis or gut-brain connection, how your gut and your brain are talking to each other inside of us. And knowing the research side of it, like 60% of constipation is unexplained. IBS is a disorder of gut-brain miscommunication. And I want to understand from that how stress, emotions, or even trauma can shape digestion. And so it's that blend of personal experience and evidence-based practice that now defines everything I do.
You're a true expert, so having the lived experience and also the educated knowledge to really understand what's going on a deeper level, and then to also experience the symptoms on top of it. No, unfortunately, you're probably the best person in the best position to help your own symptoms. But yeah, you really have a deep understanding of it. So just you mentioned there about the gut-brain axis, and this is something that a lot of people will have heard of, but won't actually really have a kind of deeper knowledge of it. Could you dive into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so the gut and your brain are talking to each other all the time. They're intimately connected. That's how I would see it. So what your brain tells your gut can interpret that normally, or it can interpret that sensitively. So say in the context of IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, your brain might tell your gut something and your gut might go, oh my God, I don't know. I think that's way above my head, and you might experience more symptoms like bloating or gas or change in bowel habit. Conversely, your gut might tell your brain something and your brain might go, oh my gosh, danger, danger. And then that can, in effect, change how things move to your gut and how you feel symptoms in your gut. And it's very, very complex, this whole thing. I mean, there's amazing scientists and researchers out there trying to understand the mechanisms, which we do not fully understand, nor maybe ever will fully understand. But we know that that's greatly involved in how people experience symptoms that are deemed functional, meaning that you have these symptoms, but you might not see them on a scan. In terms of all of that, we also have to consider what's in our gut, which are these microbes, termed your microbiome or microbiota, collection of all these trillions of microbes, 30 trillion. There's a lot of zeros there. They are mostly bacteria in your large intestine. They are definitely playing a role in how things move through your gut and how things are functioning in your gut. And you also have things like hormones and neurotransmitters. You might have heard of something called serotonin that's involved as well, but lots of other things. And then obviously if you have any sort of psychological symptoms, anxiety, depression, or even if you're just stressed day to day, or even if you may not take any time to relax day to day, that can also be sent down to your gut and interpreted differently. So it's kind of like all of that together to explain why this is happening for people. And I think it's good to understand that it's never all in your head, but your brain is definitely involved.
A lot of components there working under the surface to kind of, I suppose, that would cause symptoms to manifest. Would then you say, just from that, the what you messaged there about the gut and the connection between them, would you say that eating the wrong foods could then put you into kind of flight or fight mode, would then cause a real stressor that would, I suppose, exacerbate or come forward as like a mental health issue, maybe anxiety, and maybe depression, things like that?
Food is kind of works its way down to your digestive system after about, I say, 4 to 8 hours. It reaches something called your large intestine, which is the last 1.5 meters of your intestinal tract. And that's where all your bugs are, or the majority of these bacteria live. And their job is to digest our leftover food. And what they mainly feed on are plants or remnants of plants, or otherwise known as fibre. So in IBS, the reaction to food is how these bugs are breaking down the food, and maybe the person is experiencing that sensitively. So therefore they experience the symptoms. If you are in fight or flight, which is kind of this nervous system state where you're kind of alert or maybe hypervigilant or stressed or anxious, that can worsen the response to how you feel after digestion of food. But then the other way that you're asking there of how does food contribute to psychological well-being or mental health, there are some really interesting studies that showed eating a Mediterranean diet, which the base of your diet is all of these beautiful plant-based foods, whole grains, fruit, vegetables, nuts, seeds, pulses, along with a good dollop of extra virgin olive oil, lesser amounts of, you kind of could choose lean proteins like fish, a lot of fish, shellfish, beans and lentils and maybe poultry, and then lesser amounts of red meat and, the processed foods and junk food that we know we shouldn't be eating a lot of. When people were put on trials eating this Mediterranean diet correctly, they did show a reduction in depression symptoms, which is really fascinating because we now know that it's probably due to how the food is feeding these bugs. And then the bugs produce chemicals that communicate with the rest of your body, including your brain. And that can make an impression of how you feel day to day. So yeah, it's massively involved what you eat and how these bugs operate to how you feel day to day.
Yeah, that's great insight. And in the sense of the Mediterranean diet, would you say it's very whole food specific and the removal of ultra processed foods would be a big component in that?
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. If I compare two meals, one you buy in a shop, say you bought a sandwich, chicken, mayo, and you had some crisps and fizzy drinks. I know a bit extreme, but like just say you had that. Versus at home, you made a chicken sandwich on whole grain bread, maybe some hummus and olives, and you had some yogurt or kefir with that and an apple, say. There'd be a huge difference in the amount of processing. So you'd have a lot less of the preservatives, additives, emulsifiers. But is that the whole story? I'm not really convinced. What you also have is way less fibre in the shop bought food, and you've much higher sugar, much higher fat, and much higher salt. So it's the whole picture of that I think makes a difference. But whole food diets, yeah, it's very hard to find a study that will have a negative effect of a whole food diet. But it's, there's a lot of scaremongering, I think, about the ultra processed thing. And I just don't think that there's research to support that yet. So I wouldn't be afraid of having some processed foods in my diet because some of them are actually nutritious. But just bring it back to basics, which is meal balance. So on your plate, you would have some good quality protein, hopefully a whole grain and lots of different vegetables at different meals or fruits, and maybe add in some nuts and seeds, that kind of thing. An approach to having more whole foods generally will win the race in terms of having a better diet and a better gut function, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. And I suppose there is a lot of scaremongering. People are very fearful out there of what's on the shelf now, and people are getting quite a lot of understanding. Like, I suppose there's a difference between foods that are processed and ultra processed. I think it's understanding the difference in between and not to be fearful, because I suppose this can lead to a lot of food anxiety. And like, if you're dealing with IBS or IBD, you already have toilet anxiety and health anxiety. To add food down on top of it could be really very, very hard on the mental health. So we've talked about the gut-brain axis. One thing that you practice yourself is gut hypnotherapy. And this is something that I am fascinated to hear about. Could you dive into that for us a bit?
Yeah, I'm fascinated myself by it. So it's a bit of a mouthful. Termed gut-directed hypnotherapy. So people will be kind of thinking, oh, that sounds woo, or that sounds very bizarre, but it's very much an evidence-based. I mean, we have a lot of studies that back this up, that it's effective, primarily for IBS, but I can also use it in inflammatory bowel disease when there's ongoing symptoms, particularly if there's anxiety or stress linked to symptoms. It works wonders. So it's a proven gut-mind therapy, essentially, that's trying to rewire your body's responses to stimuli. It's nothing to do with stage, so there's no clucking like a chicken or doing a Tina Turner. There's no purple cloaks or swinging watches. There's none of that, okay? It's very much therapeutic and it's very structured. It uses relaxation, imagery, storytelling in a way, positive suggestion to calm the gut brain axis. So when you are deeply relaxed, you've heightened awareness. So it's basically talking to your subconscious mind. You'd be familiar with something like a reverie or a daydream where you're sort of caught in your own thoughts and the rest of the world kind of disappears. It's a bit like that. You change the state of mind, so you're very, very relaxed. You're neither awake nor asleep. You're just in a reverie.
Sorry to interrupt. Is that like dropping into theta brain waves? Would that be the same?
I'm not really sure because we have different levels of how hypnotized people go. So it's definitely rest and digest. You're definitely in a rested state because sometimes I can hear people's gut gurgling, that borborgamy, and I know that they're getting really, really deeply relaxed. And you can see the eyes fluttering and a lot of different sort of like things that you can notice about a person kind of quite slumped and breathing really, really deeply. So while they're in that state, I basically tell a story, and this story can target symptoms. So say if it was like diarrhea, fear of leaving the house, and not finding a toilet anxiety, food anxiety, bloating. You can talk about the gut brain axis, talk about being relaxed, having confidence, forgetting things that you don't really want to think about anymore. There's lots of different avenues, sort of personalized to each person. So over time, basically what it's doing is changing or retraining how the brain interprets gut signals. So it definitely reduces pain. It acts on the pain centers in the brain and it eases that hypersensitivity in the gut. So it relaxes that. It's as effective as the low FODMAP diet, which is the diet I mentioned at the beginning, is what we kind of might use for people with IBS, not all the time, but sometimes. And even though they're targeting different things. So this is how fascinating it is because diet can change the gut environment. It's like reducing the food for your microbes and thereby getting a response. But hypnosis is changing how the gut and your brain are communicating with each other. And I've seen people completely resolve long-term food fears and intolerances. Definitely not placebo, and because we know that people maintain their symptom relief in some of the studies up to 8 years for follow-up. So that's really, really intriguing. And interesting because you do want long-term results, not short-term. I think that's one of the few tools that helps people move from constant vigilance and panic about symptoms to actually trusting their gut again. You can figure out why your gut does what it does and how it does it. And that information is gold because once you know that, then you're better able to focus on how to target it and resolve your issues.
That is unbelievable and really kind of moving into modern science approach to dealing with gut health. I know myself,
Okay.
I smoked for years when I was younger, and what actually was one of the things that helped me give them up was hypnotherapy. I literally
Oh,
walked out of a session. Yeah, oh, it was unbelievable. I walked out of a session of hypnotherapy and I was like, I actually don't have a cigarette craving. Could you dive into how you would kind of structure someone's lifestyle after a good hypnotherapy session? Would they come away then with a practical nutrition sheet to follow?
yeah, I combine both. So they're two halves of the same system. So I call my program Diet Hypno or Calm Gut, whatever. But I kind of combine the dietetic part, the nutrition part, lifestyle with the hypnosis. And my programs would run probably over 12 weeks because we know you need about 6 sessions of hypnotherapy to get the response. It kind of happens over time. So during the sessions, you listen to a script and then you get a recording of the script to listen to in between the weeks when we're not meeting, and that reinforces the messaging. On the nutrition side of things, I would definitely target people's diet, and that's different for everybody. I think what people appear to feel is the right thing to do if you have gut symptoms is just restrict your diet. And I think that narrative is changing because I use restrictive diets less and less. But what I do focus on, and don't ever underestimate this, but having regular meals is super important for gut motility and gut function. It also helps you meet your requirements for fibre, protein, vitamins, minerals. Calcium is really important for digestive disorders as well. Yeah, so regular meals and that balance of meals, and then helping people increase soluble fiber intake. And this is kind of a scary part for a lot of people because they think fiber is triggering. It has just changed that you should be on a low fiber diet. I would never recommend a low fiber diet, only if somebody, in hospital have a lot of strictures in the bowel or after surgery and a lot of complications. But generally what we want is to give our body fiber because it feeds those microbes. And this type of soluble fiber in foods that are gentle and easy to tolerate For example, oats. You can try sourdough bread, you can try some quinoa, potatoes, and then your vegetables like sweet potato, spinach, tomatoes, carrots, turnips, green beans, all of them mild and gentle and easy to tolerate. Your fruits like bananas or kiwis or berries, adding in some linseed seeds or chia seeds, so some nuts and seeds are really helpful for these bugs as well. And nuts like peanuts or walnuts, and then trying to have some pulses in your diet. And again, this is a big thing for people. A lot of people don't like to have beans or lentils in their diet, but you can try them in very small amounts and puree like hummus. Just what I'm trying to get at here is that diversity of plant-based foods, all the different food groups feed different bugs. So the more bugs you feed, the more resilient they will be and the more that they will protect you. Gut lining, your gut function, your mental health, for example. So I really focus on having that regular meals, meeting requirements and expanding plant-based foods in the diet. I've seen some really great results from that. So do that always before a restriction or sometimes mini restrictions if they appear obvious. But yeah, so it's personalized nutrition alongside the gut-directed hypnotherapy. And yeah, I've seen some really good results so far. I think they're very promising.
It's really good to hear because I know I speak to a lot of people who suffer with IBD, and now suddenly I'm speaking to a few people with IBS who would also say, because they know what I'm experiencing, they would open up about their own gut issues. And a lot of people, I suppose, from speaking to people, you feel it's very individual. Everyone has different triggers, whereas I would eat a lot of red meat in my diet. I find my bowel is well able to manage it. Whereas if I speak to a friend of mine, she can't even look at red meat or she will have an issue. In the sense of personalized nutrition, when you get someone who comes into your clinic, you have to sit down with them and say, okay, you know your body. What do you know you can handle? Or is there a way of kind of building your system back up to maybe have foods that you previously thought you couldn't have?
Great question. Yes, I'm going to take the second part of that question. Yes, I would always do a personalized assessment and understand what people eat, and I can give recommendations based on that. And a plan to optimize nutrition is really important because of these microbes. But for people who feel they haven't been able to have a food in the past, can you train your gut to have it again? I believe so. For the most part, yes. So give me an example of a food and I'll give you an example of how you can test that to implement it into your diet. Is there any food that comes to your mind or something that you would exclude and not have, but want to have?
Oranges. I used to love them as a child, but I know in the same sense, if I looked at them, it would be the quickest bowel movement you've ever come across.
Really?
Yeah, oranges and orange juice, actually.
Okay, well, orange juice, yeah. There's a difference between oranges and orange
Yeah.
juice because in orange juice, you've got higher fructose. And so as humans, we only have a certain amount of receptors in our small intestine for fructose. So if you have a lot of juice, it can bypass, not get absorbed in small intestine, rush into your large intestine, meet your bugs, fermentation happens, and it can create an osmotic effect, meaning it can draw water into your bowel and thereby experience more bowel motions. Oranges themselves, pretty non-fermentable, high water content, soluble fibre. Is an orange? You could just take an orange and peel it and have a few segments and do nothing else on that day and then observe. And if you didn't get diarrhea or any symptoms untoward or more moderate to severe, then the next day you could have peel another orange and have 4 segments. And then observe and see what happens. If nothing major happens, then you kind of go on the third day and you would have 6 segments of the orange and you sort of build up like that really, really slowly, because what we know is that you probably have a bug down there that likes digesting oranges or not. But if you don't have oranges in your diet and you put oranges in, you mightn't have the bug hanging around that likes it, so it has an effect. Whereas if you put it in really slowly, you kind of train your bugs to kind of identify this food and then learn how to digest it without giving you symptoms. And you can do that for breads, onion, garlic, pulses, lactose, which are the main foods that kind of are triggering for people. So you go really, really slowly. It's not a race. It doesn't matter how long it takes you. Some people will do this over days. Other people will like weeks. Other times people will like months to do this. But you have to keep consistently introducing a food in small amounts to help train your body to recognize it, learn to break it down, and for you to tolerate it again. But it's worth doing.
Yeah.
But the longer you spend off of food, the harder it is to get it back in. So it really kind of sometimes depends on the food and the composition of the food. But the aim should always be to expand the diet within reason. Nobody wants a lot of symptoms. If you're having symptoms, stop any challenge. But it's not all foods that are triggering. If that's the case, it would definitely take, I think, an opportunity to sit with somebody who might understand this and break it down for you and help you change direction and see what could help you. And in that case, I would say maybe sometimes it's that hypervigilance or anxiety or food fear. So combining something like trying to expand your diet with gut-directed hypnotherapy would be very helpful.
Amazing. And with the gut-directed hypnotherapy, is that specifically for IBS or is there an IBD component that can come into it as
Oh
well?
no, what I'm doing is targeting symptoms. So your IBD, your sort of Crohn's or colitis, primarily is treated with medication for the most part, for the majority of people. So that's to keep the inflammation down. But what we find is that even if the inflammation isn't there, people may still suffer with gut symptoms, such as pain, bloating, gas, unpredictable bowel habits, may also have food fear, food anxiety, toilet anxiety. So gut-directed hypnotherapy is always going to be able to target them. So it can be used across the board. I use it for people with reflux as well, constipation. So
Why?
any digestive condition, it can be targeted because it's just targeting what that person is experiencing. So it can be really great, yeah.
Amazing, because there's so many people. It's nearly every person that I speak to now, and I suppose because my life is IBD and I speak about it online now, everyone seems to have a gut health issue when they speak to me, like, oh, I'm kind of experiencing this. But unfortunately, they are on the rise, and they're like even IBD cases in Ireland are skyrocketing. They're up to about 50,000 now. I know it was when I was first diagnosed, there was very few of us at the time. There was a lot less than that. Do you
Yeah,
see a
yeah.
lot more people coming into your clinic in the last couple of years? Has there definitely been a rise in cases?
Well, I think I wouldn't be able to judge it based on my sense, but I do think I agree with you that a lot of people have digestive issues. And yeah, the last figure I had from Crohn's and colitis Ireland was 40,000. So if you got 50,000, yes, it definitely is on the increase.
I think it's an
I think
estimate. I don't think there's actually definitive numbers,
you're right.
unfortunately.
We do not have a database. I think the ECHO, which is like a European-led kind of group, are going to bring in a database. Hopefully, over the next few years, we'll have a better estimate of sufferers in Ireland. But it's they also maybe not always increasing, but there's more awareness. People are more aware that these conditions exist, and maybe with I think social media, it kind of breaks down barriers for people to talk about it a little bit more. But when you look at the studies, about 40% of people at any one time has a gut symptom. So whether there's a bit of bloating or gas or reflux or a pain or the bowels not moving properly, 40% out there have that going on today.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely, I suppose we live in a very stressful society at the moment. We're constantly triggered by phones, everything like this. Everyone's under pressures. And I suppose I know myself, stress can definitely be a trigger to exacerbate symptoms for me. So no wonder things are on the rise.
Yeah. And I think what I always ask people that question as well, like how would you rate stress? How are your symptoms on holidays? How are your symptoms over the summer versus school or university or work or trying to just kind of get a perspective on that. And then I'll always ask people, what do you do that you find relaxing? And a lot of people kind of scratch their head and go, oh yeah, what do I do? And a very common answer is like, I watch telly or I go for a walk. Neither of those things are actually deliberately relaxing your body. They're great. Walking is fantastic. Watching telly, go for it. It just may not be having the effect on your gut. So a deliberate relaxation in your day doesn't have to be hypnosis, but some like deep belly breathing, some of the meditation apps, guided meditation apps are fantastic. Stopping, doing what you're doing, do nothing. Yoga can be really good, like a hobby, listening to podcasts.
Yeah, there we go.
So something that's very relaxing. So you kind of, again, kind of zoning into something, just focusing on that and being present with that. That can help change your nervous system to bring you into a more relaxed state. And that's a beautiful message for your gut brain axis.
Definitely, the education has changed so much because I think taking in an approach of mind, body, and spirit to your gut health is a great way to look at it. Like what goes into your mouth and what goes into your mind are two things that are going to have a massive effect. And getting the education now that's out there from listening to people like yourself is a great thing to do. You've written Why You Can't Go and Gut Feeling, and you've also collaborated with Crohn's and Colitis Ireland on a cookbook. Could you dive into what brought you into the author sphere?
Yeah, so first I think was gut feeling. So that's a collection of recipes of low FODMAP recipes and kind of reference guide that I wrote with a colleague of mine, one of me. And that was at a time when FODMAPs was kind of getting popular and familiar. And in my clinic, it's like something that people wanted was recipes. So I just bit the bullet and said, well, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try and publish a book on recipes. So I had spent a couple of weeks in my kitchen at home, cooking, taking photographs and doing these recipes. And I sent it off to one of the publishers in Ireland. And they said, yeah, that's a great idea. I think we'll publish that. So that was the first book. And then more recently, I think it was last summer actually, so about a year ago, I wrote Why You Can't Go, and this is a book on constipation because I want to demystify what constipation is and start a conversation or help people see what it is, because most people are very unsatisfied with the treatment that they get. It's far more common than people think. People find it very hard to talk about their bowels, and I get that, but it's hugely under discussed. And I think so many of my patients have issues with their bowels, especially with completely emptying their bowels. And I also felt that the right plan, diet, fibre, fluid, toileting habits, pelvic floor assessment, targeting gut-brain axis can fix it. But it's not one thing for one person. It's about stacking all of those things together. So it's because I lived it and I know how tough it can be when nothing works. It's not just about fibre, it's multifactorial, but it is fixable. But I just wanted people to get their hands on this, should they also be suffering and not getting the support they need. So I just want people to be informed and see what the evidence is and to have more confidence in managing their gut health.
Amazing. And I imagine when you are researching a book and everything, it's a great education for yourself. And how much time actually goes into writing a book?
A lot. Well, you have the idea for a long time. I probably had the idea for 3 years before I thought, oh, will I, won't I? But it's something that I do all the time in my practice, getting better at helping people manage their constipation. It's a tricky one. It's a huge medical challenge. And it's like an artwork trying to put together the things that actually work for each person and to solve that. So I think you're learning as you go through that experience and looking at the literature, what's out there. And we would love 1,000 more studies, good quality studies on what works and what doesn't work. But these studies are rarely funded and rarely get over the finishing line. So we have to kind of use best practice. And then you're kind of like 6 months writing, and then there's the editing part and then the publication part. So it's a huge journey. But it's really interesting. I'm so delighted I did it. I'm glad it's out there and that people know that it isn't as simple as increasing fibre and taking a few laxatives. It can be a lot more complex than that, but there's always a solution for everybody. That's what I truly believe, that with everybody there is a way out and there is a way to control your bowels. And, what we see out there is like supplements, online hype. Just be very skeptical, guys, because there's so much rubbish out there and evidence will always win. Individualized, personalized plans will always trump that. And the basics. Never forget the basics.
100%. And in one sense, we have all the knowledge in the world of a touch of a button, which is great. And in another sense, there's such a negative to it too, because you need to be very careful about what knowledge you're letting in and what practices, you said, you bring into your own life. I always say, no matter when I give advice from my own experience, I'm like, this is my individual experience, not gospel. This works for me, might not work for anyone else. So you have to be very careful, obviously, where you get your information from. But in the sense of the book, are they available in hard copy or can people listen to them as audiobooks? Wonderful. I'll make sure and add a link in description for anyone who's interested in checking them out afterwards. When it comes to travel, social events, they're very, very stressful things for people suffering with IBS, IBD. Do you have any strategies from your own experience and from your experience as a practitioner for navigating these issues?
Yeah, I think if you think about eating out, that's something that people might not do when they suffer with these conditions. But I do think it's important to go if you want to go. So a little bit of planning ahead can really help with eating out. So you'll see that most restaurants, I think like nearly 99% of restaurants will have their menu online. So you can look that up beforehand and you can kind of think, well, what would I eat off this menu? What would suit me? Is there something? Is there not something? And then maybe you can call in advance and say, oh, I'm coming to your restaurant tonight and look, I can't have X, Y, and Z. Would you mind making sure that this meal would provide this? Most restaurants are accommodating for that. I think if you sort of do convince them that you do actually have a medical condition and you're not doing it on a whim, it's important that you just don't want that stress when eating out. You won't have to sit beside the toilet and expect to have to dash off mid-conversation. You want to enjoy your meal out. So I think that can really, really help. I think you can do a bit of the groundwork beforehand to understand what you can and cannot eat. And that can help relax the situation as well. I do think you should eat regularly that day. I can't stress that enough, but have your breakfast and your lunch before you eat out or whatever time you're eating out. Have your regular meals. Don't save up for one meal of the evenings. Fasting just I don't think helps because it would impact how things move through your gut. If you're traveling, going on a plane or a train or long journeys, bring snacks with you. Bring snacks that you like, that you find satisfying, that fill you up, that you enjoy. And it's about the occasion as well. It's a social occasion. So try and take your time eating and enjoy the company that you're with. There's also, that diaphragmatic breathing or deep belly breathing. Did I say that? But it's a very simple exercise that anybody can do at any time, any place, where you can sort of help to put your body into a relaxed state. And you're basically just breathing into your nose for 5 seconds while expanding your tummy. And then you hold it for 2 seconds. And then you breathe out through your mouth, you purse lips, a bit like this, really slowly for say about 7 seconds. So if you kind of think about it, in for 5, hold for 2, out for 7 through your mouth. If you do that 5 or 10 times, you'll feel your shoulders relaxing, you feel your jaw relaxing. When you're doing that, your gut is relaxing. You're bringing blood supply back to your gut and it enhances that. So you could do that before you go out, or when you're just getting out of your car, or when you're just sitting at the restaurant table. It really just helps you get ready for food, and it helps give a safe message to your brain that everything is okay.
100%. I think being very conscious about what you're eating in the moment as well. I feel, and everyone, I'm terrible for it myself, is putting on YouTube or you're doing something while you're eating. You're not consciously eating the food or making sure that you chew it really well. Do you find that even just simple little practices like slowing down and regular chewing are good to
Oh,
implement?
it's lovely. Some people, and that was their only issue, is that they did not sit down to eat, whether they had young kids or busy jobs, and just, eating on the fly, eating on the go, eating standing up. And they had huge issues with their gut because they're just in fight or flight and you're putting food in very quickly into your gut. Your gut's just a bit overwhelmed, thinking, what's going on here? So if you can slow down, take your time eating, chew your food really well, just chew your food until it's like porridge texture, yogurt before swallowing. So when you chew your food really well, you added enzymes from your mouth called amylase and lipase to help start breaking down the food. And you chew it really well. So that when it enters your stomach can do its job, mixing it with acid and other enzymes, but your stomach can't do the job of your mouth. It doesn't have teeth. It doesn't have the amylase. So if you skip that step, it's harder on your stomach. And thereby, maybe your stomach is just overwhelmed and it can't process food. And we also see that further down your gut, you don't absorb as much nutrients if you don't chew your food. So sitting down, relaxing, try not to be too distracted can work wonders for gut symptoms.
Yeah,
Totally convinced of that. Yeah.
I know I read a study recently about where gulping as opposed to sipping water can trigger a stress response in the body. And like, sure, that's water, which is probably the easiest thing to go through the system. If you're
Yeah.
gulping and wolfing down food, obviously your body's saying, oh my God, what are you doing to me? You put way too much pressure on a system that's already impacted. So definitely
Yeah.
consciously eating your food must make a massive difference.
If you can take your time, just kind of protect 15 minutes to eat your food, you probably will notice some really big impacts on your overall gut function and how you feel.
Completely. There's a massive thing. I think we're going back to the old school and how things used to be done. Remember, we used to say grace before food, but you'd obviously take a moment with intent to go and eat your food. Definitely the sacred part of eating food, we've definitely lost in the busyness of life and slowing down. I know there's a guy I do breath work with called Ronan O'Brien. He always says you got to slow down to catch up. And it just sings into my mind every time now where I'm trying to be. Yeah, absolutely. Just to be very conscious about everything we do because we're allowing the modern world to make us too busy. So we've kind of just touched on FODMAPs and kind of specific diets. Is there any ones that you find are the best? Some that are worse? I know you have to be very careful. There's so many diets out there now. What ones are you finding a kind of best practice for people to learn about?
Well, I think the gut microbes have transformed our view of health and wellness and how we treat conditions and manage ourselves. So I would think that the diet should align with that. So if I look at everything, especially in inflammatory bowel disease, it's a Mediterranean diet. For mental health, it's Mediterranean diet. And thankfully, we have 3 trials in IBS with Mediterranean diet and all were very positive. So that would be my first approach. First, before ever restricting. Sometimes you do need to restrict, get that, but it's not the first step you take. So I did kind of allude to what Mediterranean diet is, but it's a lot of plant-based foods and your healthy fats and less processed foods. Taking your time to eat, staying hydrated, not overdoing alcohol. That I think is the best approach to manage gut symptoms long term.
Do you find that when it comes to ethnicity, it's something I'm just looking a lot into, is seasonal vegetables related to your ethnicity, like eating, if you're an Irish person, obviously you're born in Ireland, your ethnicity is Irish, that you would stick to kind of Irish grown foods to be from the from the locality. Is there any evidence to kind of support that?
Not really. I get that, and I do think that that's great. But what the gut microbes like is variety, or the buzzword is diversity. So all the different types of grains, fruit, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and pulses, that's what feeds your gut. I don't know if it really matters what it is, so long as it's variety. That's where the benefits seem to be. So, but it is important to, I think it's great to be able to shop local, eat seasonal, and have variety within that for sustainability and other factors for the environment. But in terms of gut health, it'll still always come down to just variety of these foods where you gain a lot of benefit.
Yeah, and in the same sense as organic versus non-organic, is there anything that's kind of showing forward that for someone suffering with health issues, it might be better to go the organic route?
I don't really think so. It's not to me convincing. And I think it's kind of exclusive because not everybody can afford organics. So when you look at the evidence, it isn't like organic is way, way better. It's not. If you can afford it, okay, but you can also just wash your vegetables and you can peel vegetables and you can cook vegetables. So to me, it doesn't really mean that it's superior. I think I'd bring it back to the diversity is better always, because I meet people who don't have any nuts or seeds in their diet, or they don't have any pulses, or they avoid carbs, or they don't like fruit. So you're kind of missing whole food groups. So you're missing feeding a whole section of bugs. And these bugs produce substances that protect us. So you might have covered short chain fatty acids before on this, but it's like what the bugs produce in your body. And these short chain fatty acids are the bits that communicate with other organs, and are aligned with functions all over the body. You name it, they're probably involved. So to get these short chain fatty acids, you need to feed your gut bugs. To feed your gut bugs, the more variety or diversity you have, the more resilient and balanced they appear to be. So that's the best we've got so far with the evidence. There's a lot to learn, a lot more to know, especially with mechanisms, but I would say it's a very sensible approach. That would be my first approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And diversity, obviously the education changes all the time, but I suppose having a diverse diet has been a kind of a mainstay for so many years now. And like, there's obviously evidence to support it. Someone who might be listening to this podcast today might be experiencing what they think is IBS symptoms. Could you dive into exactly what those symptoms might be, whether it might just be an upset tummy from foods they're eating or something they should maybe go and see a doctor about?
The criteria for IBS means that you have abdominal pain. That's first and foremost. Must have pain. And then you have a change in bowel habit that's related to defecation or how you move. Most people will probably have some element of bloating and gas as well. And if that's going on for a couple of months and you feel that doesn't feel right for me, particularly your bowel habit not being right, have an old trip to your doctor, because it's worthwhile discussing what it is. What you don't want to see is any blood in your stool, any acute weight loss, being woken up at night with your bowels, vomiting, having a fever, or if anybody in your family suffers with digestive conditions, you want to get that checked out. And to actually be officially diagnosed with IBS, you have to rule out celiac disease, and there's a simple blood test for that you can do with your GP. They might also rule out inflammatory markers should they suspect that might be the case as well. So a good workup, medical workup, is really important to help you understand what is going on in your gut.
Yeah, and I suppose where self-diagnosis is such a thing that these days where Dr. Google can tell you everything.
Oh, I know.
One to someone
So
who
dangerous.
Absolutely. Someone who can go and give you actual factual information is definitely the way to go. Brain fog seems to be a symptom that a lot of people with IBS and IBD can experience. Is there any, I've heard of different things like grain brain and things like that. And a lot of people I speak to say if they eat a lot of carbs, their brain function will slow down a little bit. Is there any evidence to kind of base that kind of assumption around, or?
Yeah, I would always take it that that's what the person feels. So that is valid, that that's what your experience is. So we can investigate that. So different grains are digested differently. They have different structures and compositions. So I would wouldn't take just brain fog on its own. I would try to look at the whole picture and see what other symptoms that they're having, and then the types of grains that people are having. And then you can sort of do mini exclusions and challenges just to see if that would improve. So exclusion means a short-term exclusion of a food for say 2 to 4 weeks. Usually within 2 weeks, people see an impact if they're excluding. 4 weeks is maybe optimum. And then put the food back in and see do your symptoms come back if they had resolved. If they have, you're barking up the right tree. If not, it's trying to tell you, no, there's something else involved here. What is that? But I don't pull out brain fog as a singular thing, because so many other elements may impact brain fog as well, particularly with females and hormones. So put my hand up there. But it's more, I think when you get overall improvement in symptoms, like if you get the rest of the picture right, brain fog tends to come down as well if it's gut related.
Okay.
So no studies on food directly, but I do think it's about improving your overall diet. In terms of Mediterranean diet, probably has a positive effect on your gut itself, and then obviously communication with your brain health, your mood, maybe cognition. So that's the angle I would take. Maybe thinking is more indirect, but it actually would help. And if you can manage your symptoms, you tend to feel better from a brain fog point of view. But there may also be a hormonal element.
Could be a lot going on.
Exactly.
So when it comes to your own daily diet, what would like a breakfast, lunch, dinner menu look like for you?
So have coffee first thing. I don't need it for my breakfast. I don't care what anybody says. I need coffee. I also do a crossword, coffee and crossword, because that helps my bowel move. And then I would have breakfast within probably 2 hours of getting up, and I would generally have oats, and I'd try and pimp that up then with some protein. I like yogurt or milk. I'd add some nuts and seeds and fruits and try and change them up or not. I'm a big fan of raspberries, blueberries, probably just stick to them. And then for my lunch, it's the one thing I don't like doing in the day are the lunch boxes and prepping lunches, but it goes a long way to eating well the next day. So I make sure I do that. So I'd usually have some sort of grain or leftovers from the night before, like sweet potatoes. I like chickpeas. I like lentils. I love feta. I probably have feta every day. I like chicken. I like tuna, salmon. And then I would add in some veggies, whatever's in the house. And I'll probably add some seeds on top and a good old dash of extra virgin olive oil. That's when really good. And then the evening time, as my mom, I try to cook foods that everyone else would eat. So I'm probably not as adventurous as I used to be. But we would generally have potatoes or rice, noodles, and we generally have chicken. My kids don't like fish these days, so I don't get to eat enough fish. But we like prawns, beef, mince. They don't like beans either. That's why I have them at lunch. And then I try and have different veggies. And snacks, I like yogurt. I like nuts. I love almonds. I'll have chocolate. I had some fizzy, what do you call them, Haribo the other day because we've Halloween here. Generally don't eat too many of those foods.
We have
But
to have
if
our
I did want
vices
them,
around Halloween, don't we?
if I did want them, I would have some. Like I don't, I'm not one of those people that are 2 squares of dark chocolate. I'm like, no, no, no. If I want chocolate, just eat chocolate. So I'm happy. And I would have another couple of coffees throughout the day as well. So that's my usual day.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been saying with coffee now myself, and I went off it for so long thinking, oh my God, my stomach issues, maybe I shouldn't be having coffee. But I realise
Yeah.
now that, consciously having my coffee and not scoffing it down as I'm running into work has made a massive difference in how caffeine affects
Really?
my bowels. Just for a moment, I want to take a break from the pod to speak to you about Ostique Connect from Sol's Healthcare. One of the hardest things about living with a stoma or living with IBD can be the isolation that comes with it. I know from my own experience, chronic illness can be a very lonely place. I've been very vocal about the effect it had on me in my teenage years and how my actual fear of getting a stoma and living life with a bag nearly ended up me not being here today. If I'd had a way to connect with other people who were living with IBD or they were living with a stoma, I could have learned from their lived experience. It would have eased so much the fear of what I was going through. Connecting and learning from another is exactly why I started this podcast, which is why I want to tell you about Ostique Connect by Salts. It's the first ever peer-to-peer support app for people who are managing gut health conditions. So whether you have a stoma now, maybe you'll have one in the future, or you've had one in the past, Ostique Connect has a bespoke algorithm that helps you meet people from all over the world. People who've been on a similar journey to your own. So through the app, you can make supportive connections and you can have one-to-one conversations. It also gives you the chance to join forums and connect with a larger group of people. You can ask and you can answer any questions that arise. It's a great place to provide support in a safe space. And there's also helpful blogs and there's podcast episodes too. Ostique Connect by Salts is available to download via the Apple App Store and Google Play. So if you want to check it out, click the links in the episode description or simply search Ostique Connect. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the episode. When it comes to supplements, is there any that you would recommend as like a good gut health supplement?
Yeah, it depends again on your symptoms. So probiotics are probably the most researched. So it depends on your symptoms, what you're having. So I really am on board with, I would only recommend a supplement that has very good quality research behind it, randomized controlled, blinded trials that I know it works in particular conditions. Because probiotics are strain specific. There's thousands of strains in your gut and you're taking one generic strain, putting it into your gut, expecting it to work. You better have high hopes that it will. And there's so much products out there that have no clinical trials, so I won't be recommending them. But the probiotics for IBS is quite a strong evidence base now for particular strains. So I might recommend those. In colitis as well, there's some convincing evidence of certain probiotics helping. For Crohn's disease, not so much. So for IBS and colitis, yes, I might. And there's other things that might help with gut symptoms, like there's the active ingredient of peppermint oil that can be in a capsule that can help with spasms and bloating. Big fan of the fibre supplement psyllium husks. Have you heard of that?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, so you can get this in capsular powder form or you can titrate the dosing. That's a beautiful fibre. It's very unique. There's nothing else like it in its chemical structure and it's very good at regulating bowel motions. So whether you have diarrhea or constipation or a mix of both, it helps bring you back into center to have more normal poos. So I would use that quite a lot in patients with gut issues. Yeah. And it's a beautiful soluble fibre as well, so it adds to your plant-based diversity.
Absolutely brilliant, yeah, because I suppose the supplement industry is wildly unregulated and you always hear things coming out about ones that aren't probably made in the best practice and stuff like that. So it's great to hear from someone who knows what they're talking about, which ones would actually be beneficial.
Yeah.
I suppose the approach to the gut has changed so much in the last couple of years. Is there any approaches you'd like to see implemented further? How much more do you think needs to change before things are in a really good space for people to understand their gut health?
The gut is dynamic and it's changing, and these bugs kind of do play a huge role in everything. But I think joined up care, particularly inflammatory bowel disease and IBS, so you have a dietitian, or get a referral to a dietitian. Like everybody should see a dietitian with inflammatory bowel disease, but we know that that's not happening. So I'd love that. I'd love more gastro dietitians out there. I think don't forget the psychological element, behavioral therapies, whether it's yoga, mindfulness, or gut-directed hypnotherapy. I think they should be, first line, not last resort, and that you would have a good medical doctor on your team to help you understand what you're suffering with and help join the dots. So I think that integrated care, what we call integrated care, combining therapies can be really helpful. And that's what I'm trying to do in my work. And I think that's where the future is at. The mind and body cannot be treated separately, and that, you do have a support team. I know you have family and friends, but your healthcare practitioners should be able to listen to you and understand what you're actually suffering with. And that can go a really long way in helping people understand what they're dealing with and to find solutions that work.
Definitely a holistic approach rather than a separate approach is definitely something to keep in mind. And definitely, as you said, I think everyone should go and see a dietitian. The more knowledge you have completely with IBD, IBS, whatever it is, you need that knowledge rather than just, as I said, getting it from Dr. Google.
I think you can learn so much because, as we alluded to before, there's so much noise out there. All the stuff that you hear is like very confusing. Like, oh, is that right? Or is that right? Or is that right? Do I eat that? Will I get that symptom? So just trying to calm that noise and give you a relevant pathway of what would help with you and your situation is a real investment in your health. Yeah.
And you speak very openly online with your page, Gut Health Matters. Do you specifically stick to Instagram or do you have a blog? What's your socials that you like to use?
I kind of do a bit of everything. At the moment, I'm on a hiatus from Instagram. I leave my account up there, but I did it sort of for 5 years flat out. And personally, I just felt it was having maybe a negative effect on me as a person. So I stopped.
I get that, yeah.
And I thought it was really nice not to have your brain just thinking, what will I put on Instagram today? Will I say this or will I say that? I do a lot of other projects anyway. It's very time consuming. So I have all my posts still live, and I have a website, so I would use blogs. Yeah, I have an email list, and I do a lot of events and talks, and I'm trying to get more into the research side of things. So a bit of a mix, but it was just a personal decision not to focus on too much social media for a while. And I'm actually really enjoying it, so I'm not sure if I'm going back.
Social media can take over your whole life, and especially when you want to post consistently, you want to build it up, it can be like a full-time job in itself. There's a reason people have social media managers.
Yeah, I know there's that as well, and I kind of feel like I still can do really valuable work and impact people's lives without being on social media. And also, if we talk about relaxation and being able to look after ourselves, I know that relaxation time is really important and is finding time to spend with people I love. And I'm a mom, I'm a single mom, I'm a dance mom, a hockey mom. I want to be able to do all those things really well and be present doing it. So I'll like confess, like sometimes I would be on my phone going, give me a minute, I'm doing my Instagram. Mom, I'm like, give me a minute. I'm like, I don't want any of that anymore in my life. So it's kind of like that was the trigger to stop. But I do think that that's a really important part of managing ourselves, our guts, our mental health, is to create time where we can be present and relax and have connection in our lives, because that can really dampen that kind of nervous system response to being on alert all the time. I think that's an important part of our daily lives.
Being present is something that we are losing, and being present in daily moments is a great way to, calm the whole system and actually have just a better life, and enjoy the things that really truly matter. Because I know when you're saying there about finding time to post on Instagram while being a mother, my mother has a very funny story where she says when we were kids, she used to hide in the ensuite shower and close the door so she'd have a minute to herself.
I totally relate.
So I can't imagine having to update an Instagram on top of that. So that's just an awful lot of work.
My life is so much better without it. I can tell you that. I can confess that as well. But I have a website, so if anybody had any questions, you're more than welcome to write me a message there. So I am, people can still find me, but you have to kind of weigh it up with your own life as well, and how much you can give to.
You mentioned there about having an impact on people's lives. If there was someone who was listening today and they're just feeling completely overwhelmed by their gut symptoms, they don't know where to start, where would you just say the first step for them will be?
I know you can guess what the answer is, but regular meals. Have a breakfast, have a lunch, have a dinner. Don't think too much about anything, but try and have it consistently throughout the day. That will improve your gut function tremendously. Try and have some soluble fibre foods. So we mentioned things like the kind of grains and fruit and veg, that you can start having more variety of those foods with. Stay hydrated. Small consistent changes can go a very long way. I had a lady in my clinic this week who just changed her breakfast and all her symptoms disappeared. I'm like, this is brilliant. And she didn't get to do all the other bits that we had done. She just did that one thing, and I'm like, super. So don't ever underestimate how just having a regular balanced meal, it's so boring and so bland as a message, isn't it? But it actually is the thing that works. Anything that sounds boring generally works.
Taking it back to
Um,
basics, yeah.
yeah, so much basics, and don't underestimate how stress, lack of sleep, not taking a bit of relaxation time can really impact your bowel as well. And as you mentioned and brought up, which is very valid, try and just take your time eating and chew your food. So they're like the basics. It goes so far. And don't just think restriction. That'd be one of the last things I'd be thinking of.
Is there any thoughts you'd like to share?
I think the whole thing of like thinking that diet is the only reason why you'd have gut symptoms, it is not. And to try and look at the big picture. But I think that's come through our talk today. And something
Yeah,
that isn't really talked about a lot is that connection in our lives to family, to friends, to partners. Because our gut brain axis is wired for safety. And when you feel connected, your nerve system will downshift. You'll have lower stress hormones, for example. The pain sensitivity might drop, and digestion will just get permission to do its job. Chronic isolation, which I think a lot of people with these conditions may be in. It's like a little threat, and you're probably more vigilant, and you stop living your best life and being social. You may not even feel productive with your job. But like a calm conversation, hug, laughing with a friend can really help regulate your nervous system. Having something that brings you joy in your day, again, is never really talked about in lots of dietitian or gastro consultations, but I just see it as being super important. So if that was, I would just add that in as well.
yeah, absolutely. Because I know they say serotonin was always thought to be just in the brain before. The serotonin, the happy chemical. Have I got that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, isn't it? They've shown that they've more of a serotonin content in your gut as opposed to your brain.
Yeah, yeah, you do. Yeah, 70% is down in your gut. And it plays a big role in gut movement, or how things move through your gut.
Very good advice, to get back out and socialize. And because I know we're more connected than we've ever been in the world, but so many people seem to be suffering with isolation in the same sense. So getting out and making actual human connection as opposed to maybe, as I say,
Yeah.
as I talk over a Zoom call.
Yeah, I do believe that though. I really do think it's an important aspect that isn't really talked about that often.
Yeah, absolutely. And a question I tend to put to all my guests because I find the answers so intriguing on a personal level and on a work level as well, I suppose, because they both mirror each other sometimes. What does happiness look like to you?
Happiness equals perfect food. I do really like my job, and I like making sure that I do it really well and keep on top of what the evidence base is. And I just really like that. My old boss said to me, if you love what you do, it'll never feel like work. And I really completely agree with that. But as I said, I enjoy watching my children grow and being present. That gives me a lot of joy. And I did say this already, but just hanging out with the people that I love and being outdoors as well. I really love that. So it's not really about any perfect balance. Really don't like the word perfection. There never is a perfect anything, but feeling at ease and feeling grounded and having, being able to deal with stuff that comes your way. And I think when you look after yourself and feel well, you're much better able to do that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Is there any final points you'd like to make?
But I didn't really talk
Yeah,
about something called nocebo effect. Have you ever heard of that?
it sounds very interesting.
So, when there's a placebo effect, when somebody tells you something will work and you take it and it works even though there's nothing in that thing that you took. And that's placebo effect. But the opposite of that is nocebo effect. And this is when you have a negative expectation of something. So say about food. So we see this a lot with food and food anxiety and food fear. If you think something will cause you symptoms, it can actually cause you symptoms. So for a lot of the space out there and the noise, you will generally come across gluten is the devil and dairy is so awful, inflammatory. None of that's actually been proven in any clinical trial. But because you hear it so often, you probably think, oh, I think maybe I can't tolerate gluten or I can't tolerate milk. So that when you have these foods, you have symptoms. So in a clinical setting or research setting, they've done really cool trials where they blind people and they tell them they're giving them a food, but they kind of cheat and don't give them the food. So whether it's gluten or lactose, the patient or the person in the trial thinks they're having the food. And would you believe after a few hours they get symptoms, but they didn't actually have the food. They had a disguised food. So that's nocebo effect. So if anybody here is struggling with increasing food in their diet and not being able to eat plant-based foods in particular, I would say that we have to kind of think of it as a complex entity, and that how you think, anticipation of food, and what you eat are all grossly kind of interconnected, as is your brain and how you determine how you react to a food. Just be always taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture will always probably enlighten you, and know that there's ways around that you can usually expand your diet, because that is the aim here. Everything that we see in the gut health space and research is about expanding diets in terms of whole foods, like we said at the beginning.
It is wicked interesting, and it's mad how the mind can be such a powerfully positive and negative tool, and we can gaslight ourselves into thinking we can't have a certain food by maybe preconceived notions and stuff we're hearing online. So that's very interesting to hear.
Do you want one more thing that I think is interesting? And this is from the hypnosis space. And these were trials that they did in the Vietnam War. And so it was a hypnotherapist who was like the godfather of hypnotherapy in the States when he came back from the war. But at that time, he had an interest in hypnosis, went to Vietnam as a doctor, and they had run out of morphine, and there was all of these soldiers in a hospital in excruciating pain with limbs blown off or whatever. And they'd run out of pain medication. So what he said was he went and filled up syringes with water and said, this is a special morphine. This is the really, really good morphine. And he gave it to the soldiers, and a lot of them did not experience any pain, because it's the way he told them about what they were going to get. Their expectation was that this is morphine. He was so convincing because he was able to hypnotize them, tell them the story, and then it worked. That's placebo. But it was hypnotizable as well. So the brain is just so powerful.
Absolutely. What we see to believe creates our reality. That's crazy. Absolutely. That's such an interesting thing. Lorraine, it has been absolutely excellent. Thank you so much. You've been so insightful. I really appreciate you coming on. And what I'll do is I'll make sure and give links so people, if they're looking to contact you, can check out your website and check out the books as well if they're looking for more information on all things gut health.
Keep the faith. There's always a solution for every single person.
And that's it. Keep keeping the faith. Thank you. That was episode 14 of the Survival Project. I want to say a massive thank you to Lorraine for coming on and sharing all her knowledge with us. One thing that really stands out from today is that gut health is not just about one particular food, one particular supplement, or just a diagnosis in itself. It's about looking at the bigger picture. The bigger picture being how we eat, how we think, how we rest, how connected we feel with one another, and how safe our nervous system actually feels day to day. As Lorraine said, there is always a solution, even if it takes time and support to find out what actually works for you. I'm going to leave links in the description for Lorraine's books, her website, and any further resources you might like. Once again, I want to say a massive thank you to Salt Healthcare for supporting this episode and for backing all the patient education, conversations, and for helping me to build a platform that put lived experience at the centre. If you yourself found this episode helpful, please consider sharing with someone who might need it, subscribing to the podcast, or leaving a review. It really genuinely helps. Till next week, see you then.